Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chess.com's coverage of the Barber and Rockefeller, two amazing scholastic tournaments. I am Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, and it is my pleasure to be commentating today with National Master William Aramil. William, how are you doing? How excited are you to be covering the Barber and Rockefeller?
Well, I'm doing very well, and I'm excited to be working along the legend, Daniel himself.
Don't mention it. So today's program consists of several different sub-tournaments. We want to keep you fully updated on what we will be covering. Of course, today is the final round of the National Tournament of Senior State Champions, but what we will be focusing on is, of course, the Barber National Tournament of Middle School State Champions, and then the Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller III National Tournament of Elementary School Champions. That would be grades K through 5. So both of those should be incredibly fun, very, very strong young players in both tournaments. And so let's take a look at the prizes that these kids are playing for. William, as we can see, pretty serious money that's on the table here for all of these tournaments.
Yeah, I wish I could have some of this money back when I was playing. I mean, back in the day, they gave out some scholarships for this, UTD scholarships or University of Texas at Dallas back in the day. But I don't remember these extra monetary incentives.
Indeed, indeed. So, they're not just playing some online games. They're duking it out for $2,000 first prize, $1,500 second, and $1,000 for bronze medal in all of these tournaments. So it's going to be amazing. We have the Barber and Rockefeller coming your way in just 2 minutes or so. The final round of the senior championships will be played at 12 p.m. EST. And the second round of the Barber and Rockefeller at 3 p.m. Eastern, and the final round at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's a grueling format. These are 3 classical games played in one day. I remember that was the format in the nationals, and that is not an easy thing to do, to maintain quality of play over 3 long games. You think they're going to manage to do that, William?
Well, I think we're used to probably playing 2 games in a day, those longer time controls. But once you get to 3, I think that's quite a burden. And I think half the battle is just stamina itself, kind of pivoting off of what you said.
Indeed. It's, man, I mean, just one game can be very tough to play, and the kids know everybody will be watching. We will be watching. I'm always excited to see the future of American chess at their best. Invariably, the games are fighting, and there's going to be a lot of intrigue that's happening here. So I can't wait for these games to get underway. It's going to be a tremendous event.
And players like yourself, of course, you never had to play in these. You were already too good. I think just the normal kids, we play in these types of tournaments. But
well, yeah,
you're too strong.
Yeah, somehow I never managed to play. And well, Denker is of course the high school tournament, but I never managed to. I think when I was growing up, the Barber still wasn't a thing, and somehow I never got a chance to play in the Denker. And as we speak, I think the games have just gone underway. We see the top board in the Barber, a game between International Master Christopher Yu and National Master Jason Wang, 2 incredibly strong young players. That has just begun. So are you familiar with Christopher, William?
Yeah, I think he's a world champion even for maybe 12, or I don't know how old he is, but top player in the country for his age, correct?
Yeah, and he is from the Bay Area, so I've been watching his rise steadily from the time he was tiny. Now he's a established international master, and here we see sort of an Alpen Sicilian. He waited for e6 and playing c3. So this is a pretty standard opening, of course, where white tries to go d4. And let's take a quick survey of some of the other games that have just begun. We see Arthur Goa, international master. I'm going to go on a limb. I think Arthur Goa might be Arthur Goa. And south of Chalk, that's Donald Johnson. Donald Johnson actually is from Charlotte. I know him very, very well. And despite that rating, that doesn't tell the whole story. He's an incredibly strong player, very, very dangerous and capable of dealing some upsets. So he's taking his time on the first move here, I suppose. Very complicated position, isn't it?
Yeah, the most complicated position in all of chess.
True. A lot to think about. Hopefully, maybe Donald is finishing making his tea. So let's take a look at what else is there. There's Bach go against Avi Kaplan. I believe that is a Rockefeller game. Sometimes I'll have to double check which of these games are Barber games, which of these games are Rockefeller games. But here we have a Jabava London, actually, interestingly enough, which has become, or like a Barry system, which has become a very, very popular line recently. White goes knight c3, preparing e4, and sort of inducing d5. And now white just develops normally. So here we have this position. It's been very, very popular at all levels of late. And Kaplan thinking about how to proceed here. So we see these rating disparities, William, in a lot of these games. How do you think that there's going to be a lot of upsets? How do you think the higher rated kids are sort of handling the pressure of facing the lower rateds?
I mean, historically speaking, just in any chess tournaments, but especially these, upsets are definitely very, very common. And you're talking about the best players for their ages. And you know that some are underrated. Actually, just about all of them are underrated. So you know they have a lot of potential and upside. So no one's safe. That's how I look at these things. And also Avi Kaplan, he's from Illinois, and I believe Bach is from Florida. And I want to say that they are in the Barber.
They're in the Barber. Okay, and I will also clarify that I was informed these are chess.com ratings. So they might be a faithful representation of the actual ratings, but I'm not going to rely on that. So for the top games, we're going to be double checking their actual ratings.
I know Avi. Avi's an expert, and Bach is a master. So those are their USCF ratings.
Got it. Interesting. So here we have another very top-rated game. We have Sandeep Seturaman. That name definitely rings a bell, playing out a Slav against Pranav Prem. Again, I believe that is the Rockefeller game, one of the top Rockefeller boards. And again, we'll point out that the time control is 70 minutes plus 10 seconds increment. So these aren't blitz games that they're playing. They're literally playing 3 games essentially of classical chess per day. So they are working and grinding all day long, are these kids. And it's awesome to see that all of this has gone online and the process has transitioned so seamlessly. What do you think about that, William? Do you think it's creating some sort of an impact on the kids as player, or are they so used to playing online that it's really nothing for them?
I think, okay, going to your second point, I mean, kids, of course, they play lots of bullet and lots of blitz, at least the majority of them. So they're kind of in their comfort zone, right? At the same time, though, there's just nothing that replicates the feeling, the presence of over the board. And I know probably you in particular, you will have an intimidating presence at the board. And I'm a big believer in the psychology of the game and just the mental warfare that can take place, and a little stare down here, especially when you play that really powerful move and you just want to see how your opponent responds and how they feel. And you can very often tell when your opponent is uncomfortable, but you can't really spot that online. But don't get me wrong, playing online is fantastic because you can play anyone across the world. There are no real financial restrictions and no traveling restrictions either. So it's great in many respects. Of course, you never want any sort of cheating, and I expect nothing but the highest integrity from all these players. That's always one of the drawbacks, of course.
Great points, absolutely, and especially the one I think about the psychological influence of playing over the board chess, which of course plays a role, particularly in scholastic chess. Psychological antics and facial expressions. Well, that plays a role at all levels. It's not just something for club players. And let's take a quick look at how Christopher Yu's game is proceeding against Jason Wang. So the Alpen Sicilian has transitioned into a very interesting position. I'm not too familiar with the position that's on the board. So let's take a look at what happened. We had this move knight a3, very, very, I think, common in the Alpen Sicilian. The knight is heading for b5. And of course, it eventually wants to deliver a royal fork on c7. So here we have knight c6, bishop b3. Black takes the pawn, and now knight b5 anyway. I think this is all standard fare. Of course, if you take the bishop here, well, then there's knight c7 check, picking off the queen. So Jason drops his queen back to defend. Christopher recovers the pawn. Jason brings his knight to a fortress, and then they make several moves. And they have this position on the board. So what occurs to you here, William? Do you think this is still theory? I'm not familiar with this line, so
well, it's sort of nostalgic for me, because actually when I was playing in the Denker, my go-to weapon was the C3 Sicilian. Not this particular line, but I would prep a lot of those variations with the early capture on C5, and then try to go into those end games. Because the old theory was where you try to Black would give up that C5 pawn and then get a lot of counterplay, but I had a lot of those end games worked out. So I think naturally I would gravitate towards White's positions here, because I automatically notice the 3 against 2 on the queen side, and I just like those types of end game prospects. So when the game simplifies down, yeah, and of course the weak pawns on c6 and a7. But
Right.
hey, I'm here for the bad jokes and the bad chess moves to provide balance to your greatness. So I'm not going to try to give too much chess advice when someone several tiers above my pay grade is in the house. So
no, I think
but
those
that's
are
my
great
opinion
points.
on that.
No, those are great points you raised. I think particularly about the majority on the queen side favoring White in any endgame. So I feel like the ball is definitely Jason's court here to equalize. What he might consider is a move like e5, opening up the diagonal for the bishop. He does have, of course, this very strong knight on d5, although, we can notice that it might be dislodged at a later point by the move c3 to c4. So we'll see how that unfolds. Let's make a little bit of a tour around some of the other games. Of course, there's a ton of games that are ongoing, so we won't be able to cover everything and perhaps spend as much time on every game as we would like. But hopefully we'll give you a pretty decent sense of the top games and some of the players. But once again, there's tens of games that are going on. So we have National Master Sully McConnell with the black pieces against. Oh man, I wouldn't say I'm terrible at pronunciation, but I'm not great at it either. So have mercy, Benson Sheikh Naidre. Yeah, probably that will go down in history as one of the worst pronunciations ever. And we have a kind of a cross between a Catalan and a Queen's Indian defense. Are you familiar with Sully or Benson?
I'm not familiar with either player, and I figured it's better if just one person butchers a pronunciation. So if there's anything that you can do wrong today, I gotta at least give you something.
Absolutely, we got to equalize the playing field. So just a pretty calm position here. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that we see a lot of kids playing d4, and even at the very high level of scholastic chess, at least when I was growing up, everybody was playing e4. Now, and I like to see this, a lot of kids are playing a little bit more positionally, and growing up, their styles are a little bit more well-rounded than they used to be, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely I noticed the trend too, and being probably I want to say 11 years your senior. Are you 24?
24, yeah.
All right, so yeah, I got it right.
Nice.
But yeah, I think when I started out, there was a lot more e4 for sure, but then d4 and then e4 and then d4 again. And it's funny because, a lot of the theories getting worked out and a lot of the tactical lines. So people figure out that, all right, you have to play a little bit more nuanced. And I like those double fianchetto type positions. I feel like you can just play chess. You don't actually have to be bogged down by too much theory. And maybe it's not objectively the most accurate, but I think there's a lot of life left. So if you just want to outplay your opponent. So I've played a lot of this stuff myself, especially if I don't feel like prepping that much. I think it's just a nice fallback.
I agree. You can just kind of play based on the concepts that you learn. I'm hearing the unmistakable sound of a draw for, but that might be from another game a blitz game I was observing previously. These kids are fighting players. They're not, nobody's offering a draw on move 6. So let's take a look at the game of Harlem for Brew. That is Brewington Hardaway. I saw him in the Chess Kid Speed Chess Championship. A very, very strong young player. And he's facing Abhinav Dinesh. We have a Rai Lopez here. Berlin, well, kind of a Berlin that transitioned into kind of a Steinitz variation. And pretty standard fare here. Let's take a look at what happens. A4. Okay, D3, sort of a more conservative approach chosen by Brewington. And again, we see Abhinav familiar with all of the sort of classic Rai Lopez ideas. So nothing to write home about here, but I feel like Brewington already developing kind of pressure on the king side. Perhaps knight f5 here should be considered. Generally in these positions, William, I feel like it's a good idea for black to play g6, bishop g7 in order to keep all these squares on the king side under control. This starts to feel a little bit dangerous for black. Not sure what you think.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the traditional plans. But at the same time, though, wow, this might be a slight disagreement. I feel fine with black's position here. I think
unacceptable. You're leaving the commentary. You are not allowed to disagree. So what do you think black might do here?
I wonder if ideas like knight f4 become possible, and then trying to post the knight up on e5. Just very dynamic chess there. And then you can still be able to play g6, bishop g7, and then your bishop is now potentially powerful on that diagonal. So it could kind of all work out.
And you have, this knight becomes stranded. This pawn on f4 is kind of both a strength and a weakness, but it's more of a strength here because it's restricting the knight's movement backwards.
So you like my moves?
I have to say I don't dislike them. I'm not going to give you as much of a compliment as to say that I like them, but I certainly don't dislike. I don't think white should take on f4 though. I think that perhaps white should go absolute bonkers and play something like knight f5, or perhaps queen g4 should be considered, or something. I mean, bishop f7 ideas always hang in the air in these positions as well, but I'm not sure there's anything concrete. So you might very well be right here.
And what if I go g6 there? Is knight h6 kind of the intention?
Yeah,
and then I have to give up the dark squared bishop, right?
Precisely, and that creates its own problems. Of course, the dark square complex on the king side is now very weak, and now the queen can really come in to g4 with great effect. So we'll see how Abhinav handles these complications. But in the meantime, let's continue surveying some of the top games from the Barber. So I wanted to look at I wanted to see if Donald actually managed to play a first move. Let's see. I'm searching for him because I don't remember his chess.com handle. But in the meantime, so we have this game between Bach and Avi.
Southridge Hawk is Donald Johnson.
All right, Southridge Hawk. I should know that. There we go.
I think I know who Northridge Hawk is.
I think I know who Northridge Hawk is too. He's a good friend here in Charlotte. I'm glad you're familiar with him as well. So we have a Najdorf and an h3 variation, which I think is Donald's main line. And actually we see here the move knight to b3, which I think is not the most common move, the most common being knight to e2. But, there's so many attempts nowadays in the Najdorf. Everything has been tried, from move 6 h4, which I actually played in a US championship game, to, queen f3. It's hard to make a move that hasn't been played yet. So this is still well within the bounds of general theory.
So I have a question, just generally speaking, about how you would approach theoretical openings. Now, do you always have a backup? And do you prefer, for example, a move like e6, which is more flexible, or more committal moves like e5? So just more flexibility with your pawn breaks and structures. So I just want to know your overall approach. Now, of course, you can't generalize everything, but yeah.
Well, if you talk specifically in the Najdorf, I was always an e5 Najdorf player. And for those of you, in the audience who don't play the Najdorf maybe full time, I don't know why anybody wouldn't play the Najdorf, but there's e6 setups, which is called the Scheveningen setup. And then there's e5, where black, yes, yields control of the d5 square, but he gets more space, and this has its own properties. So I feel like you have to decide beforehand whether you're a Scheveningen player or an e5 player, because I see a lot of players toggling between these two moves based on white's response. And I feel like that's just not a very prudent way to approach it. And I try to extend that to openings as a whole, right? To choose some sort of repertoire that has structural commonalities as much as possible between openings. So while I like playing different stuff, I also want to save myself some work. So you don't want to just play 50 different things that have 50 different structures. You're not going to be able to deepen your knowledge in any one particular opening. But I feel like E5 nowadays has become the preferred approach of top players most of the time. Although Gary Kasparov, of course, Gary Kasparov perfected a six line, but yeah, here we see E5, and we had Kasparov actually yesterday.
And I thought those E6 lines could be a little dangerous, at least back in the day. G4, the carries attack type ideas were one of the reasons why some players didn't want to deal with E6.
Yeah,
I don't know how you feel about that line, but perhaps that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, definitely. No, I didn't. That's one of the reasons I didn't play the Scheveningen, and I hated allowing G4 that early. But here we still have theory, and they will have theory for another couple of moves. So let's see if we can find any games that are at a little bit of a more advanced stage. Going back to Christopher Yu's game against Jason Wang, we see that Jason has managed to castle, and he's developed his dark squared bishop. So, the more I look at this, the more I think that Black is probably doing fine. But as you pointed out, William, he's just got to be very, very careful, structurally speaking. If Christopher dislodges this knight from d5 and then he manages to castle, Black might run into some positional problems. So I think Jason's got to play actively here.
Yeah, I think E5, F5, and try to make those bishops go to work. I mean, they're aiming at the king side, so that's where you attack.
Exactly. And I like that plan. E5 and then F5, try to push E4 through.
Because I think once white gets the pawns rolling on the queen side, and maybe, for example, I can get a white pawn on B4, white pawn maybe on A5 or A4, and bishop C4, something like that. It's just kind of what I like optically. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think those are pretty solid. Maybe put a queen on B3 as well, and then the pieces just kind of flow naturally. But the problem is, I don't know. It feels like white's king side will be a little bare. So I think those attacks could definitely come into play. It's going to be hard to calculate this far out.
Yeah, Black puts a bishop on G4 or something. You know what Christopher might be considering? My wild side is telling me perhaps he's considering something to the effect of queen C2. Well, we're attacking the pawn on H7. If Black defends it, perhaps he's considering castle long. Now, I like your idea, William, and I think that majority is white's main advantage. Now, this is probably way too much. I mean, it exposes the B file like this. Probably way too much. But I was thinking of something like this. I know Christopher, occasionally enjoys a type of play like this. And so do a lot of participants. But I think this might be a little bit too much. So we'll see what decision he arrives at. But yeah, I think he'll do something like short castle, and he'll have to attend to his king side, as you pointed out.
It seems hard to attack, though. With your idea of queenside castle, it just feels like you can always put a pawn on A3 and just keep the position bound on the queen side. Like, I mean, I think, yeah, it looks good to have the rook on the B file, but it's hard for me to develop any true attacking plan. Perhaps you see it, 20 moves down the line. I've seen you draw 100 arrows, so this is small work for you. But
yeah,
but I don't see any immediate plan.
The one thing I wanted to point out is if white does play A3, the one thing he's got to be careful about is a line such as, well, maybe here C4 is actually good, but something like queen takes A3 in this position is a typical idea because, well, if you take the queen, Black takes, and with tremendous interest, you have to give the queen back. So, you have tremendous complications like this. And the funny thing here is perhaps Black can just leave his queen on A3, just chilling there on the beach, no problems. Nothing personal between white's pawn and Black's queen, but something like this could arise. So perhaps Christopher's trying to evaluate these complications as well.
I'm in awe already.
Yeah, I mean, I like to just, as they say, I like to sacrifice other people's pieces, William. And when it comes to my own, I'm a little bit more emotionally attached, gotta admit. But Christopher's pieces, yeah, I'm throwing them under the bus.
Perhaps it's a little less risky to give away other people's pieces too. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I did think it definitely does. So let's look at a couple of games while they're still in the opening phase that we haven't had a chance to look at yet. We have Troy Kavanaugh against Michael Zhang, and again, let me take a look at whether this is this Barber or Rockefeller. I'm looking for these players in the Barber
Yeah, I'm
list.
trying to pull it up myself simultaneously.
Yep, Barber. So Michael is rated 2178, and Troy is rated 2079. So pretty close in rating. And I really like White's position here. Here we see another h3 knight, or this one knight d2 by Troy. Of course, Donald chose knight b3. And, well, this is a very, very typical setup, g4, bishop g2, and White develops this clamp over these light squares. And here we see him lead the knight to f5 and recapture with the e-pawn, right? Extending the diagonal for the bishop and reinforcing White's control over the d5 square. At least
White
optically,
is better here?
I feel like at least optically he's quite a bit better. I feel like Michael may have gone a little bit wrong, and we should point out also that d5 runs into bishop captures b6, and then knight takes d5. So White's control is pretty much ironclad over this d5 square, and of course the b7 pawn is also hanging.
It feels like just a permanent problem for Black, because if you can never play d5, that's usually a bad sign. And
exactly. And that's the issue with playing the c5 line, right? If you end up saddled with this weakness, well, you might be positionally devastated the rest of the game. So we'll see how Michael gets out of that. I mean, these players are all so incredibly resilient. Their defensive capabilities on balance is phenomenal. I've been consistently impressed, at chess camps that I've taught at, how resilient, how much these kids hate losing, and how well that bodes for the way that they play and defend. Well, I certainly know that some tears were shed, at least in my case, William, in some of these Scholastic tournaments. I remember a couple of really painful losses that will stay with me forever. I don't know if you had those experiences as well.
I have been more than traumatized in my lifetime. And perhaps maybe that's why I don't play as much. I'll tell you, going on with the idea of this defensive resiliency, I think the strategies, the maneuvers, the overall attitude for defending has increased so much. Positions maybe 15 years ago where I know that I would secure the full point without any real issue. Nowadays, it's like, wow, why can't I win this position? It's because players know more and more and more, and they know that, hey, I can get to this end game, and even though I'm worse, you're gonna have to show me perfect technique. And that's the amazing thing about chess. It's like you can be pretty much lost, but then not lost. And then that's where you have to pull up one of those table bases to really tell you who's winning or not.
Exactly. And, in basketball, you cannot make a 30-point comeback with one shot. There's no 30-pointer. In chess, there is a 30-pointer. One little blunder, as you point out, and 5 hours of work at times has been completely erased from the face of the earth.
It's like boxing.
One knockout blow. Exactly. And something you said rings absolutely true. Just 15 years ago, people might be there. 15 years ago, really, it's changed that much. Well, yes, it has. Like defensive capability, resiliency, and just overall knowledge of which positions to steer the game toward when you are in dire straits and are trying to swindle the game has increased exponentially. And kids know end games these days. There's an old Russian saying that goes something like, with the youth toward the end game. You're supposed to go for the end game. With the younger the player, the more you need to strive for an end game. But now I see kids, they know their end games. That's not always as true as it used to be.
And I used to hear this, especially from players that were from out of the country. They would always try to get the younger players, and just, I would say, even American players in general, into the end game, because a lot of, let's say, even Russian players would say, all right, American players don't know these end games. We're just going to, all right. exchange pieces.
Hmm.
They're going to misplay it. But now that's not quite the case. There's just so much information out there. There's the 100 end games you must know chessable course. I mean,
Hmm.
there seems to be a lot of emphasis on it and just an endless amount of tools at one's disposal. I mean, when I was younger and training for these tournaments, actually when I was
Hmm.
training for the Denker and things like that, I remember having to use things like Fritz 5.32. There was no puzzle rush. There was no 100 end games you must know, and Magnus Carlsen walking through all the end games. I mean, there just wasn't those things out
Right. Fritz was the bee's knees. Yeah, that's what you
there.
would that's
It's
what you would
crazy.
use. Wow, I'm loading up Fritz. Now it's that we don't bat an eye on something like that.
Hey, were
Exactly.
you
What
born then?
I
Trying to
was
think. Fritz
I did
5.32. That's right around the cusp
Fritz
where you were
8. No,
born.
no, Fritz 8. For me, it was Fritz 8. Ripka was, when Ripka came out, Ripka. I'm using Ripka. Are you using Ripka too? Um, Pun intended. Then it was Ripka 3. But now it's like you say, there's just so many tools. You don't even need to use an engine to study. That's how advanced training has become. You get served these positions on a golden platter. So yeah, just very, very fascinating developments. And here we see a game between Justin Zhu and Alexander Meng from, I want to say, the Rockefeller, just a very interesting position. Another Najdorf. We see that how popular the Najdorf is among these kids. And this one, white is just completely dominating William because, of course, the knight is untouchable because if queen takes a8. And if the knight is untouchable, well, this d6 pawn begins to fall. The bishop is hanging. This looks real nasty for Mr. Meng here. I'm just verifying that this is indeed a Rockefeller game.
So can we go out on a limb and say we can make our first prediction, and white will secure the full point in this game?
Yeah, this actually looks devastating because, yeah, bishop d8 also drops the rook. I don't even know where to move the bishop. You probably have to go rook a8. Oh, this is just nasty. Yeah, I will side with your prediction, William. Although, of course, the commentator jinx. So probably because we said that black is going to win, but we'll see.
I don't believe in that stuff. I'm one for
Fair.
making predictions. And when I did this a few years back with Pete Karayanis of USCF, I remember making a lot of predictions, and I want to say that a lot were right. So that's why I'm not in fear of jinxing anything. I will give my predictions with full confidence and bear the consequences if I'm wrong.
Fair. I like that approach. Just saying it like it is. Well, as we see, Avi, you're struggling against Bach, H-file getting opened. We will go on a very short break. And when we return, we will monitor how these games are transitioning from the opening into the middle game with some fascinating positions already beginning to arise. Welcome back. And it is an honor and privilege to be joined by John D. Rockefeller V, sponsor of the Rockefeller Tournament of State Champions. John, how are you this morning? What's your take on the early going of the games here?
Great. I got to be honest with you. I don't know because I'm TDing. So we're basically, watching them on Zoom. So we can have screens open on a separate, on a separate screen. But certainly in the early rounds or in the early part of a round, we focus, just on connection, making sure all the little technical issues are resolved. So it's usually not till the end of the day when I catch up with, some of the live streaming and listen to a little bit of that. But I'm actually kind of rather disassociated from the games, unfortunately, during the round.
No rest for the weary. John, could you tell us a little bit about some of the many roles that you have with U.S. chess and perhaps where you see U.S. chess going? What are some of the current initiatives that are being pursued to expand scholastic chess as well as U.S. chess as a whole?
Sure. Well, I'm a I am chair of the development committee. And so U.S. Chess became transitioned to a 501c3 in 2014, I believe it was. 2016, the development committee was formed. And it was really in about 2018 when we really started getting going. Jeff Isaac was hired as the director of development. U.S. Chess adopted the gift acceptance policy. And actually, one of the recent things we started was about a year ago. We started running a hospitality suite at the elementary school nationals, actually the grade nationals in December, the K-12 grade nationals in December, and we've now extended that to the elementary school nationals, and we're hoping to continue that in the future. And part of our hope is that people will drop by, maybe after they drop off the kid at a round, come talk with us. But it's a great idea would be, this was something that Michael Schumann came up with, was maybe when parents or coaches register their kids for a spring nationals, maybe there would be an option for them to sponsor another family, sponsor even a school, that kind of option. So those are the kinds of creative ideas that with proper funding, U.S. Chess could really pursue.
I think that's a fascinating idea. So one more general question. I mean, as you've watched in the time of COVID chess transition online, how do you think that the kids have adapted? How do you think U.S. chess has adapted as a whole? Of course, we see this tournament proceeding seamlessly, which is awesome to see. What has been your take on the recent developments in the last couple of months?
Right. Well, I mean, as of late April, early May, these tournaments were canceled. I mean, they were officially canceled. And U.S. Chess was very flexible. We really appreciate that. We floated the idea of running them as an online tournament. There was some hesitation. There were people who said, "Wait a minute, I don't know about this. There can be too many incidents of cheating online." So the idea was if we were going to pursue this online, there was going to have to be strict cheat detection methods, fair play measures. So for example, what we're doing for this tournament, it's almost like a very high powered GM, super GM tournament. Two webcams are required. So kids log into Zoom. They have one, the way we're talking, one looking right at us. But then there's a second one in the background, which is watching their screen, and it's being recorded and capturing all of that. And we about a week before the tournaments, we had required all players to log in for 5 minutes. Some players needed a lot longer than 5 minutes, up to 90, to figure out some of the specs. But we basically just walked them through, saying, okay, your microphone must be on full volume, so we need to hear you, but you don't want to hear us. So it's kind of different for a TD experience, which is it's generally a quiet room, but then sometimes kids are at home and they lose that sense of being in a tournament room, and so they might whisper out loud to themselves, thinking out the moves. And so a TD has to you listen for that. Actually, one of the nice things about Zoom is if you start talking, the screen will pop a little bit. It'll get like a yellow border. So as TDs are scrolling through Eric Vigil and I were signed to the Herring last weekend and to the Barber this weekend. And we've had 4 screens. So each player, let's say approximately 45 players per tournament. And then each player is ×2. So there are 90 windows that we look at, screens we look at. And so, but there are 4 of them. You're just constantly scrolling through and looking and seeing, hey, what's going on over there? And then we can privately chat with players. And we can say, don't do this, don't stop tilting back or lean forward, whatever it is you got to do. We want to see you. We want to see your face. And one thing we actually came up with, this was actually Tina Schweiss's idea. She did this in the senior, which is sometimes players don't chat. They don't look at their chat messaging. So what we started doing is like your name, my name, I as an administrator, or host, or co-host, I can rename somebody. So I'll say, I'll take a player's name and I'll type in all caps, tilt screen down. And so they tend to see that. So I think it's a really good way for TDs to monitor players, and for US Chess to have confidence that, fair play. And actually we get a report. Chess.com has been great. You're live in US Chess.com's live analysis team. That was really nice of Danny Wrench. They donated their services. So every night we get a report on, is there any suspicious activity? Ken Regan is also has been retained. He'll produce a further analysis at the end of the tournament. So there is a lot of scrutiny. This is, US Chess's first time with national championships online. We want to make sure things go right. And if something goes wrong, we find out about it.
Well, that's a fascinating take into sort of the inner workings, and it's great to see how diligent you are at monitoring this. Well, we want to let you get back to your work TDing. One last question: any particular player, anybody that you have your eye on in the Rockefeller tournament, who you're excited to watch? Who's your pick?
Well,
or maybe you want to remain objective. I don't know. I don't want to pressure you.
No, that's okay. I specifically requested not to be assigned to that tournament. I haven't been monitoring that at all. Of course, I'd be partial to the Maryland player, right? Because I'm from Maryland. So Hanchi Yao is the Maryland representative, and I'm hoping he does really well. But I am completely staying out of that. I'm like a non-entity, and I'm not assigned to that. And it's unlike with a tournament hall, where TDs can walk around and maybe look at other sections. I mean, it's theoretically possible in a Zoom conference, but that is completely cordoned off. Like I have access, I can get into that, but it's not as if I'm going to go, raid somebody else's tournament as a TD. That would look weird.
That makes perfect sense. Well, we don't want to keep you any longer, John. This has been an honor to be joined by you, and this is an amazing look into some of the inner workings. It's great to see US Chess to be on the vanguard of adapting to all of these developments, which has of course been so difficult. But I think you're doing a tremendous job of it, and we thank you once again for joining us.
And thank you very much to all the live streamers, US Chess, chess.com, all the donors who are sponsoring the tournaments. Thank you to everybody for making this happen in an odd time, and we hope we won't have to revisit it next year.
Thank you for all that you do, and especially as a former player of one of these events. It's guys like you that really help this type of thing even happen. So I think all the players, all the parents, all the coaches really respect people like you, and we really appreciate all the sponsors and all the people who are in the background that make these things happen. So thanks again, John.
Thanks, Will.
Well, that of course was John D. Rockefeller V, sponsor of the Rockefeller Tournament of State Champions. Just a fascinating insight, and we are just of course also appreciative of the fact that this has been made possible as we return, of course, to the games. Okay. So let us pick off where we left off. Let's take a look at some of the top games, if that sounds good to you, William.
Of course.
And we see here, of course, the game between Christopher Yu and Jason Wing, top board in the Barber. And not much has substantively changed here. Christopher has indeed decided to castle short. And William, I think you called it. I mean, Jason, it seems to be going for some sort of kingside attack here with queen h5 and perhaps bishop g4. Although it's black's position is like an old house. I can hear the creaks and the discomforting sounds of a bit of a rotten foundation here. So I'm not entirely confident in his capabilities here to attack, but he's doing what he has to do.
And I'm looking at that bishop on d6. It's just screaming. The famous saying, loose pieces drop off. So for example, there's one line like c4, and if black goes knight f4, bishop f4, well, of course, actually the queen would just fall there.
Right, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, the idea of bishop takes h7 and queen d6. So there's always possibilities like that down the line. So I think black has to be careful. But of course, again, the queen on e8 is the biggest problem.
Yeah, but absolutely. But when the queen moves to h5, that's definitely something to keep track of. And this sort of tactical awareness is just incredibly important in general. To make these tactical observations, even if you don't exactly see a way yet to necessarily put them into action or exploit them, you have to keep them in the back of your head. That's a big source of blunders. When you kind of forget to check for these kinds of tactical patterns. Well,
let's hovering over that knight, and I had the feeling that, are you looking at knight d4 as well?
I absolutely am. This move, and it's not just because I want to look cool, because but I think the knight is cool here because it can potentially go to f5, and we see these light square weaknesses. This diagonal is a little bit, how should I put it? It's just a little bit weak.
Tender.
And the queen can't go to h5 now because the queen is controlling that square too. Maybe f5 here is decent for black. So, maybe like the kid at the party that tries to look cool, the knight's just kind of stuck there, doesn't have any friends, but definitely
Bishop
stuff
C4.
to consider here. Bishop c4 to pin the knight, maybe king h8. And now if you move this bishop away, you're going to be threatening something like knight takes c6, but can that be made to work? What you can do here is play something very positional, maybe like bishop takes d5, and then something like f4. And you're trying to carve out the square for the knight. Again, using this pin. So something like this, and this knight is a very strong blockader. However, here, of course, black has a strong pawn. So I'm not sure what you think of those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact, well, I think we both agree with knight d4, but I really like the fact that black can't pin the knight. And white's pawns on f2, g2, h2, since none of them have moved, black doesn't have that accelerated attack. I think each time there's a pawn move on the king side, it gives black some sort of target or way to create a weakness. But having those three pawns unmoved and untouched really slows down any of black's attacking ideas.
Right. That's exactly right. It's just not going to be easy. So we seem to like Christopher here, and we'll let him think about how he wants to tackle this. Let's take a quick look at a game we haven't looked at yet, which is the top board in the Rockefeller tournament between Edison Chen and Brian G. And we have an incredibly sharp position here. We had a Pierce or a Perk defense, the F3 variation. So this had sort of an undertone of kind of a Najdorf or a Sicilian, but of course it is a Perk. But what we see here is opposite side castling, attacks on either side, black attacking on the queen side. And I feel like Edison got Brian kind of got the short end of the stick here, though he's trying to create intrigue in the center with d5. But Edison able to open up this h file, which is very, very dangerous. Now he swings his queen around to h2. And Brian responding with queen f6, trying to create tension against the b2 pawn. But g5 chases it away. Notice that Edison is actually not taking this pawn on h7 just yet, because it's perhaps not as good as it may appear. If you take on h7, the king escapes and black threatens, well, that is not what black is threatening. Rook h8 is what black is threatening, trapping the queen. So Edison trying to kind of finagle his way perhaps into making queen takes h7 a little bit more effective.
And knight d3 wasn't a thing, was it? I mean, it just seemed bad, but...
I think CD is the reason, right? Because the queen now defends the square.
Ah, I didn't even notice that. Okay.
But definitely something, yeah, I thought of that as well for a second, but unfortunately just didn't have time to make that happen. So bishop c5 now looks, so I'm wondering what the idea is. Maybe bishop h3. Tricky, very tricky. And there's pandemonium on the board, but I feel like white's just taking a lot of black pieces, and black is not going to be taking a lot of white pieces. So I don't really like that. Perhaps knight takes f3 should be considered, but now we take on h7, and now we take on f3. So this looks bad as well. I don't know about you, William, but I feel like Brian might be in a little bit of trouble here.
Yeah, I want to say outside of any tactical tricks, I mean, white should just be in the driver's seat because black doesn't have any immediate counterplay, and black has a lot of kingside problems to solve. It just feels like black is only relying on tricks, nothing else. And if those don't work, it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, black's got to try to make one of these things work, like knight c3. I completely agree. White's got the long-term attack here, and even positional dominance considering the blockade over the d4 square. So you're going to be monitoring how Brian attempts to get out of the situation. We talked about the role of resiliency these days, the increased role and defensive capabilities that these kids are able to show game in and game out. So we'll see if Brian will be able to display that, or if Edison will be able to take this home.
I'm going to make another prediction. I want to say Edison pulls this one off.
Oh, you do think Edison will pull this one off?
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I mean, these attacking positions, that seems to be, just by the way he's playing, it seems to be his bread and butter.
And how do you feel about castling early in those Pierce positions? I was always a believer that wasn't the best thing. I thought delaying castling was a bit better back in the day, at least.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're saying is, you know, you could go for a line where white basically goes bishop h6 before he castles, and you know, worst comes to worst, you reserve the possibility of castling short. So I tend to agree. I've played the perk with black quite a few times throughout the years, and I always found it very annoying to deal with the white king remaining in the center. So I agree, and I think that perhaps Brian should have met this move with h5, which is a very typical idea, blockading the king side and buying him some time to orchestrate something on the opposite flank. I feel like allowing the move h5 was a little bit just too risky. So, but I agree with you. I think delaying castling is something to consider in these positions. And let's swing over to board 2. In the Rockefeller, we have Alex Zhang playing Andrew Jing, and oh God, this is a Queen's Gambit declined dream. This is like a Carlsbad dream, William, for white, unless I'm misreading the position.
No, that's exactly what it looks like. The minority attack was successful. The good old, you know, rook b1 lines, b4, b5, and then black takes on b5. It looks reminiscent of that. I used to play those exchange. Well, it looks like exchange, right? Exchange variation of the decline, Carlsbad, all in that family.
Right, exactly.
Oh, there we go. Exchange variation.
Yep, a Carlsbad structure, and clamp, positional clamp by that pawn. Andrew trying to liberate himself, but man, as one international master Bartholomew would say, and in this position, even exchange sacrifices like rook takes c6 must be considered. Not yet, but what I would do here with white perhaps is just take care of your future self a little bit. You know, play h3 or g3 just so you don't have to deal with back rank checkmating ideas, which are very prevalent in these positions. You get too caught up in capturing a pawn or something, and then you miss the forest for the trees, right? And I feel like that's just generally a cause of a lot of blunders. You get so caught up in your play, you just forget to check the basics.
And black doesn't have anything immediate here, from what I see. So that, you know, gives you time to play a move like h3. And I think this is something that, and I guess I'll include myself here, master level players and above will almost play h3 automatically, especially in a blitz game. I mean, it's the first move that I thought of. Black has no proactive moves. So if your opponent can't do anything, you might as well make the slightest improvements to your position if possible.
Right. Completely agree. We see rook a7 by Alex and now queen d8 by Andrew, but even now, you know, the deal still stands. I would go h3 or g3.
Yeah, what do you prefer? That's always tricky.
That's a good question.
H3 is standard, but g3, I mean, you have the light squared bishop, so you can go king g2. I don't know.
Right. And see, h3, the problem is if black ever lands a bishop on d6, that, it's cured one of the symptoms, but the back rank is still weak. g3, it's harder to cover the g2 square, but it's more of a committal decision. If a black bishop ever lands on h3, well, that's pretty nasty. So my instinct is telling me, actually here, maybe h3 is good, because it's not like black is getting a bishop to d6 anytime soon. But this is one of those cases I'd spend 30 minutes trying to decide. By the way, is bishop takes d5 possible here? There's a very interesting line. And the idea, of course, is that the queen is overloaded, so you capture on e7. I feel like this might be... And now if black tries to counter Desperado, that drops the f7 pawn with check.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Queen f7, queen g7, mates.
Right, with checkmate. So black might have to go for this position, which... is absolutely not clear cut. This pawn is very far advanced. These positions can be very double-edged. So decision time for Alex, and chances are he's going to spend a good chunk of time calculating this. Again, I would still play h3. Very Russian school of chess, just prophylaxis and torture opponent. Rather than liquidate.
Every Russian schoolboy knows.
Well, yes, I mean, G3, if you didn't play this move, you would be kicked out of Russian camp for a knight takes d5 move.
But anyways, captures, and bishop takes d5 here. And this is the moment where the magic happens. That wasn't Yermolinsky, though. I've been working on my Agadmator, but I have a long way to go there.
I just thought of a very interesting nickname for you.
I'm excited to hear it.
Da.
Because I'm like Danya, so it's the first two letters.
Yeah. So
and da, of course, means yes in Russian.
Da, nya.
And because nya is almost like niet, which is no. So it's like yes, no. I like it. There's many levels to that nickname, William. Right. I approve. What have you done? Now nobody will call me by my real name anymore. So let us check back into the top Barber games. And we have Donald's against Arthur, which of course was a knight or for that move, knight to b3. And Donald's developing an attack here against black's king. However, his own king is very, very weak here. So this is an extremely sharp position.
I almost want to go h5 out of instinct and just give up that pawn, just to accelerate the attack for black.
Oh, you mean h5 like
for black?
For black, yeah. I was thinking. Yeah,
I don't know if it's good. It's just
it comes to mind for sure. Otherwise, I mean, black could be torn to shreds here. But the issue would be if I take on h5, it's white's also got the positional advantage of perhaps putting a knight on d5. So the question for me, but I agree with you, William. I mean, if you take on g5 twice, right? I mean, this has just got to be bad for black. Perhaps just queen h5. And there's a funny line: if black goes knight f6, I think you can liquidate into a piece-off position. Takes, and now the knight is hanging. And you could go knight g3 here, but white's going to have two pieces for a rook. So that's another thing I think a lot of people miss, is that when they're attacking, they start tunnel visioning checkmate, right? They're only looking for checkmate. But you got to look for ways to kind of liquidate and transform the advantage. And you got to keep, again, you can't miss the forest for the trees.
And the trick I had envisioned was when the queen goes to h5, is that there's knight e5, and then if some castle, then bishop g4, trapping the queen. So before the exchange on g5, obviously.
Oh, right. So something like...
just a fantasy variation, yeah.
Right, perhaps landing a bishop on g4. And maybe you could play, with that in mind, you could play g6, stopping queen h5, and then try to get a knight on e5.
So I'm saying, like, even before the pawns are traded, the original idea h5. So instead of...
sorry, my bad. Yeah. h5, queen takes h5, knight e5.
Yeah, correct.
And then if castles, it traps the queen, and it forks the rook. That is a nasty little idea.
That's what I had envisioned, just to kind of, if you think that your opponent's going to completely overrun you, you might just give a pawn back, and then you don't worry about the attack, and then maybe you can turn the tables on your opponent.
That's actually a fantastic idea, I think. Maybe bishop h3 should be tried for white, just to trade off those bishops and reinforce white's control over the d5 square. But in either case, definitely the ball in Arthur Guo's court here. He's got to solve these problems, and he's got to do so pretty urgently. But Donald right now thinking about what to do. I'm not a fan of G takes H6. That would give up this pawn with check, and White's king would have to move. So I'm not sure exactly what it is that he's contemplating. Perhaps he wants to play knight d5, but I don't see any reason to overthink it. I think he should just take on f4. So anyway, whoops, did not mean to do that. Yeah, so we'll be monitoring how this game is going. We see also very, very interesting Bach against Avi. And this, of course, is in the, I think this is in the Barber. And we see this rook landing on d7. This has got to be overwhelming for White, right?
I think so. I mean, if you take on d7, is it just pawn d7 and bishop c7 ideas? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's White to move. Okay.
Well, yeah. Oh,
okay.
At first I was thinking the same thing. I thought, oh, White sacked on d7. And see, the funny thing is, I think this move would be very strong, William. Just rook d1 would be something to consider. But I guess what Avi has in mind against this move is bishop f6. I don't necessarily trust this, and then he wants to recover that pawn on e6. If he doesn't, he's just busted here.
Yeah, you know, Avi last year was at the Whitney Young camp that I've been a part of for the last 10 years or so. So definitely a strong player from Illinois. And he's black here, correct?
He is.
My screen's a little
small. Yep, he's black. And yeah, so something you said, William, actually, I think that perhaps if black does recover the pawn, it might not be such a bad idea to consider just leaving that rook on d7 and going rook d1.
Yeah.
Again, every Russian schoolboy knows kind of move.
Because if you take, it's over, right? Bishop takes, pawn takes, and then if you go rook d8, bishop c7.
Boom.
Looks over to me.
This is over. So yeah, definitely black can't take the rook. But if he can't take the rook, then what does he do? He might want to go bishop f6 here. But see, in these positions, every move has a drawback. So now bishop h6. And if you go rook e8, then rook d8 is devastating. We talked about in a previous game, you know, the role of playing g3. The drawback would be that a bishop could land on h3 or h6. And here we see that it has. So we'll see if Bach can come up with such a move. I'm not sure, of course, that it's the best, but it does seem very strong. It does seem very strong.
And he finished his symphony.
Exactly. Next. I was trying to generate a kind of pun like that, and you beat me to the punch.
Will 1, da, nya 0.
Oh, will 1, da, nya 0. I'm trying to wait. Say that again.
No, it was just saying that the score is 1-0.
Oh, okay.
For you know, jokes and
yeah. Well, you know what?
To the punch.
We have a long
boxing
commentary
behind me, by the way. So.
Well, we have a long time left. I'm going to equalize the score very, very shortly here.
We'll see about that.
I'm gonna go ahead and equalize the score. Okay, that was terrible. Let's all take a shower after that one. So let's see what else we can find here in terms of games we haven't perhaps looked at. We should also point out that the senior final round is underway. So I'm going to load these games onto my screen. We're going to take a look at how some of those games are proceeding and some of the very illustrious players in the senior are faring. So let me just load those games in. Okay, so I should have loaded the senior games, and we see, let me just close a couple of the other games to make some room for it. Okay, so let's see who we have here. Ooh, we have some old legends, William, in the senior. Ronald Burnett, of course. He's been around for a very long time playing the American circuit, international master. And we have, who else do we have? We have Alonso Zapata against Michael Rode. Well, two legends, really. Colombian GM Alonso Zapata. He's been living in Atlanta for a long time. Illustrious chess coach, very strong player. He's actually known for beating Vishy Anand, I think, in 4 moves back in the day.
I know the exact line. Absolutely.
Right. Shall we show it to the crowd?
Sure. And do you know the story behind it, actually?
I think, is it the one where he checked the informant and like Larry Christensen? Why don't you tell the story?
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. So back in the day, I don't know if the young crowd knows what informants are, but that's kind of how players got the top level GM games and all the current information. So before the game, Anand was looking at the, he wasn't looking at the informant, but he was between Christensen. Now I'm forgetting. Maybe you should tell the story. But yeah, Christensen.
I don't remember either. It was some game. Larry Christensen was, I think, on the black side of that game.
Yeah. And I know that he looked at an informant and just him and his opponent, they played the moves and just copied the informant, but it was actually a mistake. And they had already agreed to a draw. So
right.
That
I did not know. So the move is bishop f5, but it loses on the spot to queen e2, queen e7, and now knight to d5. The queen has to move to d7 or d8, and then d3 comes, and black loses the knight. So and the game, of course, immediately. Just a shocking story. You see that even these top players are just not immune. And this was maybe 20, 25 years ago. So Anand was young, but he was already a GM.
And that reminds me of a very important learning point. I think so many times kids especially will look at an opening line and say, all right, this is the theory, but that just shows you if you trust but don't verify. You have to actually understand what you're playing and know the reasons behind it. So if you get caught in that, let me just memorize some moves and okay, I'm all set. I think that's how you run into some of your very quick losses. I know I've lost like that multiple times trying to prep and get a little too cute. I don't know about yourself, but I imagine it's happened to you as well. I mean, I think every player has fallen victim to this.
And there have just been so many stories throughout time. There was a match between Kramnik and Leko, I think World Championship 2004. There was a famous story there where Kramnik ran a certain position through the computer. As you mentioned before, William, I think it was Fritz 4 or something.
Fritz 5.32 is what I
5.32. 5.32. I think it might have been something to that effect. And Kramnik didn't give the computer enough time, so it displayed a good position for him. Leko ran the computer longer in the same position and found that, in fact, black is completely winning. And the computer recognizes it by those times if you give it, another minute or two. And Kramnik went into that line and got crushed. So we see that even with preparation being a thing, that doesn't mean you're always immune to these kinds of things. And it raises a fascinating dimension to the game. I'm switching around to show you guys who is playing in that senior. Now, some of these names might not be familiar to perhaps the younger members of the audience, but Elliot Winslow is Bay Area native, and I've known him for many years. He's a big-time player at the Mechanics Institute Chess Club in San Francisco. And he's facing off against Doug Eckert, who is from St. Louis. He's, has a job and a very demanding one, but he maintains a very high level. And I always am impressed, William, by these players who have a job and a family, but you find time to keep playing, and they maintain a pretty high level of chess.
What was there a mouse slip? Was there a
oh my goodness moment? Oh my goodness, I didn't even notice that. I'm so used to like the bong cloud and all these openings. That was a mouse slip by Winslow.
Perhaps a senior moment. I don't know.
So what's so funny, William, is that there are lines in the Benko where White's king appears on f1. And I kind of just assumed that it was one of those lines. But I know it's Black's king that's on f8. That's not what you're supposed to do. Black is just devastated here then. I think just e4, e5. Ooh. That is a nasty little mouse slip for sure. But we'll see how Elliot manages to he's a resilient player. I'm sure he's had such slip-ups before at the Mechanics, and he can come back from this. So we'll see. Good catch.
So yeah, I guess he's just going to go king g8 and king h7 and kind of rectify the situation. And I guess if you're going to play that anyway, then you're only down a move from castle and king h7, right? So
right, I suppose so. My worry would be, of course, e5, and if you move the knight away, e6, driving the wedge in. So this just seems nasty, but that's what he has to do. If you keep the king on f8, that's even worse. So we'll see how that unfolds. Now, just to update you on some of the games we briefly took a look at, we have here Anjanea Rao beating Yiding Liu. So I'm going to close this game. Just all that she has to do is escape the checks here. So we're anticipating a win here. The game that we looked at previously between Justin Zhu and Alexander Mang, as predicted, and it seems, William, your first prediction is about to come true. Up a piece is white and still attacking is Justin Zhu. So this should be just a matter of a few moves.
I plan to keep those predictions going. So
you're 1 for 1. I think you're going on 2 for 2. Considering the pun, you're like 3 for 3. You're on a roll. So, in any case, so this is going to be, I think, pretty much a fait accompli. And let's tour a couple of the other senior games. There are a couple of Grandmaster games, I think, going on. A lot of GMs playing in the senior, and we'll take a look at those games in a little while.
Oh, it's the game of Wills. Look at that, Wilson and William. Well,
yep, Wilson Gibbons and William Marcellino, and they have a Stonewall set up here, kind of an English Stonewall. So we'll see how this one unfolds. I mean, generally in these positions, you play something like c6, right? And then, oh, he takes. Ooh, interesting. So I guess what he wants is d takes c4, e5. But
strange.
What would be really nasty in this position is c5. And bishop takes, you take the queen and take the pawn, and yeah, that seems like a very odd move. I don't know.
Doesn't seem like anything a Stonewall player would really want to play. Usually just go c6 and continue as usual. I don't know why Black would do this to the structure.
And that's exactly the point, right? You want to keep the position pretty much closed.
I'm perplexed by that.
Indeed. We'll see how William tries to justify this, and apparently so is Mr. Gibbons. He's taking his time. And speaking of taking time, well, we're going to take a couple of minutes to refill our coffee, and we see a lot of the games in the Barber and Rockefeller reaching fascinating stages. So we'll be sure to keep everyone updated of all of the proceedings when we return. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our coverage of the Barber and Rockefeller tournaments of state champions. And we see many of the games now reaching advanced middle game stage. We have a couple of results, mostly on some of the lower boards, but we have a lot of action going on right now on the top boards. And we join once again the game between Christopher Yu and Jason Wing, which is the top board at the Barber. And we see here, William, a very interesting development indeed. So f5 was played by Jason, and Christopher positional sacrifice of an exchange on e5, supporting this incredibly strong knight with a move f4. So what do you think of this? This seems to me to be at the very least full compensation, if not quite a bit more.
Yeah, I want to say that, the more experienced you get at positions like this, you're not worried about the material. You can just feel it out, and that light squared bishop is sort of the long-term problem. Full compensation, yes, but do I think white is objectively winning? Probably not. But now when you start looking at black's time, I think now you can start to piece it together. So black's going to struggle to find a plan. And sometimes when you don't have a plan, then you just sort of go in circles and you don't know what to play, and your time just dwindles and dwindles. And that's going to be a problem against the very strong and talented Christopher Yu.
Indeed, indeed. He knows how to create trouble in the time pressure of his opponents. And one thing that comes to mind for Jason, I mean, this knight looks good on d5, but perhaps it can be transferred over to e4, even at the cost of a pawn, something to the effect of this. But, sacking the pawn for some airspace for his pieces. But that might give away a third pawn. So I'm not saying that solves all of his problems. Jason going for queen to d8. So his idea is, of course, to threaten queen b6 check. But what Christopher can consider is another kind of Russian schoolboy move, king h2, taking the sting out of the move queen b6. So I think you're absolutely right, William. I think the time is going to play a huge role. And for a computer, this might be easily defensible. For a human, this seems very nasty indeed. So,
yeah, and I think going back to the psychological pressure of things that we were referring to earlier, I think that's kind of why he did that too. Now, was the exchange sacrifice the best, maybe according to a computer? Probably not. But then when you start to just combine all those factors, Christopher knows that, hey, this is maybe a good chance just to prolong the game and make it harder for my opponent to solve practically over the board. Like I'm a huge fan of practical play, especially with time pressure. I don't know what you would advise to the public in that sense. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that in terms of sacrificing and practicality versus actual specific variations.
Well, it's a fascinating topic of discussion, and I absolutely agree. I'm on the same page, in terms of my stylistic preferences. I've always felt that, and this is where people can sometimes overestimate the computer's evaluation. You look at a move and you see that it's, it seems to be a mistake according to the computer. And the position goes from perhaps slightly better to slightly worse. And you say, this is such a bad move. How could I have thought of this? But then you completely undervalue and ignore the practical value of such a sacrifice. Chess is, and I think will always remain, a very distinctly practical game, where there's the objective side and there's the practical side, and the two aren't always aligned. I think that's what makes chess such a magical game. So I'm absolutely in favor of dubious moves, within reasonable limits, of course, although I'm not always reasonable, in the name of complicating the game and, bringing to the table practical benefits.
And you like to sacrifice other people's pieces, so it just makes sense that you favor dubious moves. At least you're consistent.
I am. I'm consistent in my craziness, that's for sure. And definitely, we see now the game that's before us.
Can you manage my? Sorry to interrupt you, but can you manage my financial portfolio?
Oh yeah, your risk tolerance is through the roof. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be a great financial. Oh, just invest all of your money in this speculative stock. Yes, great idea. You might sacrifice some money along the way, but I don't care about that. After all, it's other people's money. So we see, just wanted to point out Bach transitioning the game into what should be a winning endgame against Avi. And indeed, he found William this move, Rook H2. And I'm very impressed. Again, we pointed out, that even very young players these days have excellent positional feel. And we see that on full display here. Rook H1, Rook D8, and the game unfolded kind of along the lines that I think we predicted. Takes, Bishop H6. He drives the king out, Bishop E8 check, nasty check. And just kind of dropping his bishop back, chilling, and liquidating into what should be a winning endgame. Very well done, I think, by Bach here.
Very good composition of moves.
Indeed. King comes out to C3. This looks pretty much devastating. So one thing to point out is Donald, he did take on F4, but it took him 30 minutes to decide on that. And Arthur Guo now with a huge time advantage. So I still think Donald is the one pressing here. But you pointed out the role of time, William, and one can't help but notice 15 minutes on the clock after 17 moves. That is a concerning situation for Donald, given that the position is as sharp as it is.
And I think that when you play stronger players, a lot of people have the tendency of, all right, I have to play perfect. I can't make any mistakes. So now that creates a situation where you're overthinking every little moment and double checking, triple checking. And sometimes we give our opponents too much credit when they're stronger. So I think sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and say, hey, I believe in my move. My opponent can make mistakes no matter how high rated, and go with the flow. You got to believe in your moves. And if you have to spend too long on more obvious moves, what's going to happen when it's a really deep calculation? Now you're going to have time for that.
Right. When you actually have a complicated decision to make. But we have a breaking news flash. We were alerted to the fact that one of the top Rockefeller games is about to end in tragedy for Troy Kavanagh. He has blundered checkmate, inevitable checkmate, William, with Bishop E5. Queen H2 mate is unstoppable. So this is a game we thought White was dominating out of the gate. He had that control over the dark squares. Black trying D5 anyway. And I'm quite sure that White is still much, much better after something like Queen takes B7. Dominating the whole game is Troy, but he lets Black out of the gate. And, Bishop D4. Now this devilish move E4. Devilish move E4, threatening Bishop E5. And already at this point, I'm not sure if White has a defense. I think Queen A6 might have been the real blunder. And Troy resigns. What a development in this game.
Yeah, we thought White was in control of that game. But, hey, it just shows you how resilient these guys actually are. And I think that's going to be a theme that keeps coming up. When you're talking about some of the most talented players in the country, I guess you would expect nothing less.
Yeah, I mean, they hate losing, and that's a great quality to have. And I think it's shared, as you say, by all these players nowadays. The old days of kind of cigar smoking. Yeah, you played such a great game. I'm going to go for I'm going to allow you to play a brilliancy. Those days are over. These players fight to the very last drop of blood.
I have an interesting prop for you. What do you think will be the number of mice broken? What's the over/under on the
well, I'm all too familiar with that particular method of expressing one's emotion.
Oh, I didn't bring that up for any reason at all.
No. Of course, I don't know anything about that.
I mean, why would anyone list that they have a backup mouse on their Twitch page?
Yeah, well, I have one right here. This is one mouse, and then I have, I think, 3 others waiting for me on the shelf. So wow. I have this particular eventuality covered, but some of them are in advanced states of decomposition. Like I bang them once, and they still kind of work, or they rattle. The worst is when you bang a mouse and it rattles, and that sound is like you might as well break it just completely. You might as well do the job properly.
Now I don't know if you play tennis, but are you that type of guy who has like 20 tennis rackets?
Yeah, I can definitely. I do enjoy tennis actually, so I can definitely see myself breaking a racket. I'm familiar with that one video, I think, of one of the top tennis players, Baghdadis, where he like breaks 5 tennis rackets in succession, and I could just totally identify with that.
And you know, the
So,
thing is, I would say in my younger days, I could absolutely, uh, sympathize and understand it. I mean, I would not be happy about certain things myself. And breaking a mouse might be on the kinder side of things. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Uh, this is family friendly channel, so I'm
indeed,
gonna make
indeed.
sure just mice are broken rather.
Right. Well, one thing that's broken here is Brian Shee's position. Another game that we kind of called in White's favor, and they've liquidated into an end game that seems completely winning for White. To remind you guys, this is the game where White had that attack down the H file, and indeed, Edison takes the pawn, drops his queen back, and just liquidates into an end game 2 pawns up. So very, very well done here, it appears, by Edison. Now we see him kind of deftly maneuvering his pieces around knight to h3, pinning the knight to the bishop. And after a couple more moves, yeah, he just liquidates. He's 2 pawns up. And his idea is that if knight takes f3, I'm imagining the move is rook to g4 check. Now, if the king moves to the f file, you have rook f4 check winning the knight. Well, if the king moves to the h file, this just seems devastating for many reasons. One of which seems to be a move like rook f4. And if the knight moves away, this is actually a very nice one. Rook h4 check and bishop e5 check. Kind of swinging the rook back and forth, but inducing damage every time you do. And if d4, there's bishop g2. This seems to be very, very well done by, unless I'm missing something, by Edison. Bishop g3, extremely strong move.
Reminds me of a book. I don't know if you've heard of it. 2,545 domination in the endgame.
Well, I think it's 2,546. I don't know why you would confuse that, but get that straight, okay? It's 2,546. Okay. Just kidding.
I think this needs to be settled right now.
Yes, it does. Otherwise, the broadcast cannot continue.
So, Danya.
Yes.
Yeah. What number did you say?
I actually don't know.
You said 46, right?
I think there wouldn't be a book that would have that as a number, because that just isn't quite kind of a good round number. But sorry, I interrupted you. But what is that book about?
There we go. It's domination in 2545 endgame studies. I think I had the number right, unless maybe I'm flipping them. But it's all about dominating a piece. And
look at that! You got the book in your hands.
Yeah, and it's I don't know if you remember this one famous position. It's where you play king h1, and it's a sugsfang, and wherever the black bishop goes, there's going to be a fork.
Yeah, I've seen some studies like that for sure.
King on c5, knight on d4, and then pawn on a5, something like that, and then you just play king h1. It's one of those famous domination type studies. But yeah, like I was actually just looking at this the other day, and that's why this game kind of reminded me of that, where the knight is getting dominated or trapped on f3.
And this is exactly what has happened. So we should also point out, by the way, and as Edison is about to win his game, we should also point out that Alex Fishbein has won his game in the senior. I'm just trying to reach his game because there's so many of these games going on. I'm just closing some of them. He's won his game, and it is official. I think he has become the senior champion. Now let me find him. Dry County. And there he's drawn his game, so that I think has guaranteed victory. He's offered a draw, and he actually gave me a draw when I needed it for my second Grandmaster norm. So Alex Fishbein, class act. Of course, why would anyone not give me a draw? And he's drawn his game, so he is the senior champion. Are you familiar with Fishbein?
Of course, yeah. I know his work, and actually, last time that I did streaming for the collection of these national events, Fishbein actually came on with Pete Karayanis and myself and talked about one or two of his games. And I hope I'm right on this, but he was the senior champion 2 years ago as well in the U.S. Open held in Wisconsin. So this is feeling like nostalgic for me. Next time I come on, the same person's winning the title. And I first played Fishbein in Chicago Open in 2004. I also drew him, but there were no GM norm ramifications at that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but still, there have occasionally been important games where GM norm was not on the line, and we've received notice that he was actually the first ever Denker winner in 1985. So Alex Fishbein, it comes full circle. He's everywhere. He's everywhere.
You know, hopefully one day I can follow in his footsteps. So 1985 was the year I was born, and then I won the Denker back in 03. So maybe I can try to pull a little Fishbein and later on also win a senior. But obviously I can't win the first Denker of all time. That's not possible unless I have a time machine.
Right. Or, well, you couldn't win it at 0 years old, you mean? Come on. I mean, what a disappointment. What a disappointment.
Look, I tried. But look, I made it out of the womb, and
right.
I think that's victory in itself. So.
Well, you forfeited your game against Fishbein because you're round one game because you're busy exiting the womb. So I was just flipping through to an interesting game we haven't looked at yet. Sammy Shishapa against Oliver Hushin, and just a white knight on F8 has just miraculously materialized. I wonder how it got there. Oh, at first it came to H7, and now it comes to F8, hunting for black pieces. So fascinating position here. Looks like white is very much in control. Again, we see another attack down that H file, much as Donald is doing against Arthur Guo.
Speaking, you see any finishing combination here?
Yeah, I was looking for it. So queen takes F3 seems forced, and now there's some ideas with like bishop G7. Now let me just make sure. Yeah, queen E7 has been played. Knight E6. Oh, well, look at this. Now bishop F8. And he sees it immediately. And I think this is winning. Queen takes F8, queen H8, rook H7. And now it looks like black is defended, but boom goes the dynamite. Rook takes G7 and queen takes C8, winning a piece. Exploiting, once again, loose pieces drop off at rook on C8.
Was it Karpov or Christensen who said that? I can't remember.
I think it was John Nunn originally proposed it,
John
but I'm not
Nunn.
sure. And we're about to see bishop F8 on the board. Sammy definitely took on E6 with that very intention. Amazing move. And very thematic. Exploiting, of course, his control over the H file. He's just double checking here, I'm quite sure. And
wow, both pieces go to F8. Incredible.
Amazing.
Knight
amazing.
F8.
The knight F8 and bishop F8. Unbelievable.
Usually you only see bishop F8, not knight
usually
F8
you see
and bishop F8.
Well, the black's bishop starts on F8. So knight visits that square to take the bishop. Then bishop visits that square in order to crack open the H file. Amazing stuff going on. And this is exactly why we watch these games, you know. This might not be Carlsen and on, but boy, are these players fighting to the death and finding some amazing ideas. Kudos to Sammy here. And I assume this is a Rockefeller game. Awesome. I don't know which board it is, but very, very well done here by Sammy. And we're going to see queen H8 and then rook H7 and rook G7 on the board. And there we have it. Amazing. So we should also point out Brewington Hardaway, one of the top boards in the Rockefeller. He has won his game. And that was the game where we were viciously arguing over whether white had significant attacking chances on the king side. It appears that Brewington kind of combined attacks on both sides of the board, swinging his pieces around, and eventually, through a lot of painstaking maneuvering, he was able to transform his advantage, win a pawn. Oh, and he sacrificed a piece here, actually. Not sure that was very objective, but I don't know. Somehow he won. No, this is definitely better for black now. But Abhinav just wasn't able to quite contain the pawns. I know I'm going fast, just trying to get a sense of what happens. And he just quite wasn't able to make anything happen on the king side, and white was left with these vicious pawns. So kudos to Brewington for winning his game. And we can note that Edison has officially won his game as well. So a lot of decisive results here, not a lot of draws, Willie, as predicted. Amazing. All right, so what should we look at? Should we drop back to Christopher's game?
Yeah, let's give it a look. I know that he gave away an exchange.
Right.
But I want to see a player of his caliber, what kind of technique he has. I already
Yeah.
like the fact that White has, 2 extra pawns. So materially, it is even. But practically speaking, I think it should be easier to play for White. I'm not saying it's winning, just easier to play considering the circumstances. But I don't know. What do you want to do with that bishop on d2? What's your plan? Just c4,
Right.
bishop c3 type ideas? I don't know.
That concerns me. That concerns me, as does the eventual possibility that Black is going to get his knight around to e4 via f6. Not immediately, but at some point. The light squares, right? Square on e4 is concerning. And yes, this bishop is very passive. So if White can get c4, and the problem is that would weaken the knight on d4. So, what Christopher took, he did take the pawn. But this move bishop a6, I think, is very strong from a positional standpoint. And I'm not sure if I would have grabbed that bishop with such alacrity. And he goes queen b3, so he pins the knight. Of course, he doesn't win the knight because Jason can respond with rook a to d8. But perhaps what Christopher wants is to get a rook to e5 very quickly and just go for the initiative. So I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm not sure who's better. It has to be White, but I'm not sure his advantage is as vast as perhaps it appears.
And just for the audience at home, if White tried to play bishop takes f5 instead of bishop takes a6, Black could have just gone rook takes f5 because the queen was on b6, pinning the knight on d4 to the king on g1.
Right. Good point. Good point. Yeah. The spin saves the pawn for Black. Jason has offered a draw. So let's see. Jason has accompanied the move queen d6 with a draw offer. Over under, William, on whether he's going to accept that?
There's no way.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris will take the draw.
Waiting for you to say that.
I mean, why in the world would he sacrifice an exchange and then take a draw? He would have played a lot safer. And usually you don't get to that type of level. And I think you can speak to this better than I can. But if you want to be the best, you have to be willing to take risks. And you know what? Even take on objectively worse positions. And, you can play solid and go for a draw in many games and then just hope your opponent blunders, or you got to make some magic happen. And, you yourself likes to give away other people's pieces. So.
Right, exactly. No, I agree completely. I don't think Christopher's going to take it. I mean, I think that perhaps, one thing that sometimes happens when you're faced with a draw offer is you start getting indecisive and you spend 15 minutes thinking about it, and then you look and you have 5 minutes left, and then you might as well take it. But I completely agree. If you want to reach the highest level, you have to take risk, number one, and number two, you got to be willing to. And Christopher, you explicitly declined it. He's saying, I'm not even going to make a move. I'm going to tell you, I don't want this darn draw. I'm playing. He's declined it before he's even made a move. So absolutely right. Another correct prediction, William. You are Nostradamus Aramin. I think you got to change your name. If I'm changing my name to Danya, then you're changing it to Nostradamus.
Well, I appreciate the compliments, but you know what? I think if you want to be a champion, you just have to have that mindset. And I think this is with any sport, that you have to be that person who wants to take the final shot. You kind of want that moment, and nothing's going to stop you. And even in worse positions, even when you're losing a game behind on points, you're gonna win. It's that Michael Jordan mentality, or the Mamba mentality.
Yeah, that's precisely right. And we see here, what else can we have some of the games already concluding. We have William Dunham here, a bunch of pawns up. So let's take a look at it. Seems that this game between Donald and Arthur is heating up. And here I think Donald really has let this game escape his clutches. Now we see a knight appearing on c4 attacking the queen. See, the problem is that if White were castled, this would be an entirely different story. Because as it stands, Black has this very annoying check happening on e8. So this move knight to f5 from Donald, not sure how good it is. Perhaps in his next visit to the illustrious Charlotte Chess Center. You know, his game will be analyzed. He's one of the promises of Charlotte Chess, which of course is experiencing a huge boom with the founding of the Charlotte Chess Center by my close friend FM Peter Giannato. So lots of good stuff happening in Charlotte, but here we see that Arthur Go, not sure where he's from, but incredibly promising player as well.
And this is kind of going back to the basics. This is how I look at a game like this. The first thing I would tell any student is, well, this is what happens when you don't castle. I guess it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, or should I say Sunday?
Right.
Sunday afternoon quarterback. But yeah, I mean, look, this stuff just won't happen if you're castled. And also, when you're castled queen size, this gives you opportunities to go rook h7 and rook h1. So you're also taking away an attacking piece potentially. So I think, you know, Donald seems like he's a creative player, aggressive player, but, you know, mix in a little bit more fundamentals with that. And then maybe he'll see that full attacking potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. So we'll see how this unfolds. I know Donald is a very strong blitz player. So, you know, we never count him out. We should point out Arthur Go is from the state of Georgia, and he did win the junior high nationals in Atlanta in 2018. So he's already got quite the resume, and I'm sure he'll simply add to that. I mean, already an international master. So very, very accomplished, one of the shining stars of American chess. Now let's take a look at Bach against David. Well, there's really nothing to take a look at. White is about to win this game because he's about to pick off that e-pawn, and he's got a passer on c2. So that game is in the can for Bach. And let's take a look at Beethoven against, let's take a look at Christopher against Jason. So here, yeah, we see rook e1 trying to bring his rook over to e5 as predicted. And definitely, yeah, that draw offer is, you know, he didn't even consider that for a second. Yeah, he just knew.
And the other thing that happens in these situations, from my experience, is when the lower rated player is offering the draw, even if Christopher ends up in a worse position, usually the lower rated player will still take the draw even when they're better later on, because they already have their mind made up that, hey, all right, hey, Christopher, you extremely strong player, a draw is a success. So they might not even look for the winning variations when they become better if Christopher tries to overextend. So I think that's another psychological advantage of positions like this. But I don't know, rook a b8, it doesn't seem so fun for white.
Right. No, I agree. This is certainly not clear cut because, you know, the point is if you play queen c4 here, trying to keep the pin, well, rook takes b2 has to be accounted for. And if you play queen c2, well, now this pawn on f4, something we pointed out earlier, knight takes f4 is a very nasty little move here. This knight on f4 very strong. And if white tries to respond with a knight fork on e6, well, here I think that queen g3 is possible. So this and counterattacking the rook. So this just seems quite nasty as well. Problems to solve for Christopher. And you know, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just struggling to find what to do. So this is where I need your
right
2,700 plus level upside.
Well, I'm just trying to get a pulse on what's going on, and Bach has officially won his game. So I think queen c4, rook b2, something can be looked for here, such as rook e5. This might be the way forward, attacking the knight, and rook d8, and now knight takes f5, perhaps with some sort of complications. There's queen b6, bishop b3, but my intuitive sense
stuff, huh?
Right, but the problem is, William, there might be rook f to c8 here. Yeah, and I have no clue. It's knight f5 exactly. Check. Queen d4 is forced because we're attacking the queen. Takes, and then we take on b2. okay, it was that came out not exactly in the way I wanted. Not that excited that he takes 22, but it is pretty exciting for Jason. And White's structure begins to collapse.
I don't know. Maybe Christopher wants that draw again.
Yeah. And you know, I have a funny story about that, William. So I used to train with Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov for several years, and he would tell me this old Grandmaster's trick, where you get offered a draw, right? And at first you're confident, you say, "Not this draw. I'm not taking that draw." Then 2 moves later, you realize you're much worse. And then what you do is you say, "Okay, let's call it a draw. I'll be magnanimous enough to give you a draw. All right, let's call it a day now." And you kind of say it in that tone where you almost don't give your opponent a chance to say no. And he told me that he once did that, and his opponent said, "I know what you're doing, Grandmaster Kaidanov, but because I respect you so much, I'm going to give you a draw." But it's funny because that was a GM. I can see the appeal of trying to do that.
Sometimes we give our opponents too much credit. I think that's the first mistake psychologically that chess players make. I know that, if I play anyone, my attitude is, all right, I can win the game, and, I'm not going to go for a draw if I'm completely winning. Forget that, I didn't sign up to play chess to go for draws. Now, I mean, there's obvious, situations when you're playing for titles and you're playing for big cash prizes, and, a draw can be the most prudent and wise choice. But I don't know. In this specific situation, I'm still baffled at how to proceed with Christopher's position, but I don't know.
Right.
I'm going to make a prediction. So I'm going to make another one, and it's kind of a wild position. I'm going to say that even though he declined the draw offer earlier, that the game will end in a draw. Even though I have no clear variations to support my prediction. It's just pure intuition. I think the game will end in a draw anyway.
Interesting. Well,
based on what I said earlier.
Interesting. I think you just might be right. I think you have a knack for that. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this. In the meantime, we have not as many games remaining. We have the top 2 boards, of course. Guo against Johnson and Christopher against Jason. Those are our main games. Now here we see an intermediate check undertaken by Guo, and big time problems here for Donald, because if you go King F2, and whenever there is both queens hanging like this, you got to watch for checks like these, liberating Black's queen, and now the queen is won. So Donald has to go King D1, I think, or Knight E2, which is what he does. But after something like Knight takes D5, this just seems totally devastating, unfortunately, for Donald. So we'll keep an eye on how this unfolds. Of course, we've talked about resilience, and Donald is a very resilient player indeed. So let's see who else remains. We see Min against Crazy Hill check. I think.
Yeah, I think Donald's position though is kind of beyond the threshold of resiliency, though. I think that's just over. His position looks dead lost against Arthur.
Right, and I don't know if this is my internet, but
I mean, your Zoom is working fine.
Yeah, I think the server might have gone down temporarily. No, there we're back. We're back.
Let me see on my end.
Yeah, just try to. It's showing me disconnection, but my internet is working fine, I think.
Huh.
Yeah, it seems that the server is experiencing some issues. Yeah, all of the games seem to be, and the bars are, I think, oh, they're back, but back and forth we go. Another disconnection. Yeah, the server's crashing, it seems. That is unfortunate.
Well, while that gets sorted out, I had some kind of personal questions for you.
Absolutely.
At least for preparation with events like this. So when you know that you're playing some of the peers and you know their games very well, they're around your level, what do you do going into an event like this? How many kind of backup weapons do you have? I assume that you're going to at least play a sub variation and not just play what's in the database already. So just talk to me about, in terms of even like round robins and just overall preparation for events where you pretty much know who you're going to end up playing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, I mean, of course, you prepare your main openings, but what you always need is this emergency shoot. Eh, because what happens sometimes is you lose a game, and you realize, man, I prepared this opening and I'm not feeling it. I realize that my opponents are very well prepared for that. And you need to be able to make this 180, right? In the midst of a tournament, you need to be able to say, I prepared all of this, I'm scrapping it all, and I'm playing option B. So you always need to have that plan B openings wise. And you also need to be able to change on the fly. Let's say you're playing somebody who you know very well, and you think he knows you very well, and you know that he's a very tactical player, but you prepared a tactical opening. Sometimes you need to be able to play something that perhaps you didn't even prepare. And that's why it's also important to monitor top level games, do all this maintenance work, because you got to be able to play relatively unfamiliar positions on the fly. And when you're aware of a lot of openings that you don't play, well, that becomes easier to do.
I think that's some wise advice. And I think chess players need to understand that it's helpful to understand lots of different types of positions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you shouldn't ever just be stuck on one way of playing. And the more positions you learn, this gives you this flexibility to kind of pick up something on the fly, or if you need to make an adjustment, you're not going to say, oh, well, I don't like those style of positions, so I'm not going to go down. So I think it's just
Absolutely.
good to be more versatile player. You need that overall understanding.
Yeah.
And another thing for you, what is your kind of 1 or 2 year goal as a player, and maybe even down the line, like 5-10 years? How far do you want to go with chess, and what do you think your personal upside is?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how high in the world can you get?
Well, I definitely want to hit 2,700 at some point.
Okay.
But I think I'll talk about this a little bit more. I think we are going to go on a very short break just while these problems are getting fixed. And after we return, I'll expand a little bit more on my
Can't run from this question.
I definitely won't, and definitely the 2,700 club I would like to join. So we will go on a short break, and hopefully these issues will be fixed when we're back.
All right. Sounds good.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our coverage of the Barber and Rockefeller Tournaments of State Champions. Regrettably, we are experiencing some technical difficulties with the server, and while the developer team is working on fixing that ASAP, we're just going to discuss a couple of topics surrounding Scholastic Chess. But William, I can't escape that question you asked me about my goals. And we're surrounded today by so many promising and ambitious young talents. So yeah, I think that 2,700 for me would be a dream. Of course, I'm doing a lot of teaching and streaming now, so I'm just gonna live day by day and do what feels right. But nowadays, the thing is, even 2,700 doesn't necessarily buy you entry into these top tournaments. You need 2,750, so it's become incredibly difficult to reach the top. But how about you? How about yourself, William? Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about what you're up to? Because you do a lot of stuff for chess. So, what have you been up to lately, and how are you adapting to everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I had 17 school programs before COVID happened and all that, and now I've had to transition to as much of online as I could. I think overall it's working out pretty well. I would like to go back to doing some things in person. So yeah, my company, you can't see the full banner. It's Dynamic Chess, and we provide after-school programs, camps, group classes, things like that in the Chicagoland area. And then also I'm working on another project. It's called Infinite Minds, and the idea is to have chess, math, like scholastic questions, trivia, and puzzles, and we'll always kind of have those like daily puzzles, daily questions. We'll have leaderboards, and I'll actually offer weekly prizes as well. So that's something that everyone should be on the lookout for. And I just want to create as much fun as possible, especially, we don't know when we're going to kind of return to our 100% normal way of doing things, if ever. So I think internet and the online presence is here to stay. So if we can make that as fun as possible, at least while people are doing things online or still want to stay doing things online, I'm going to try to provide some fun content along with some sports trivia. I love sports. I love to talk sports, and I just love games. I think this is the thing about chess players. We like, we're competitive. So if it's chess, if it's math, if it's solving riddles, puzzles, any type of games. I think this is one thing that chess players, we're very like OCD about things. If we're latched onto a game, it's like, okay, we're gonna keep playing.
That's it. We're doing it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So hey, I want to do games. I want to have fun, and I want there to be a big community. Kind of like Twitch and chess and all that. I think it's a fantastic platform, and you're obviously one of the staples of this online movement.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's been great to see how seamlessly organizations, and we heard, of course, Mr. Rockefeller talking about how U.S. chess is adapting to this new crazy time. And it's not easy on anybody. Everybody has to find their own ways to deal with this, both personally and professionally. But chess is one of the most adaptable games out there, which you can play, as you pointed out earlier, William, you don't need that many resources. Most people have a computer and relatively decent internet connection. And that's literally all you need to, you have the world's, again, quite literally at your fingertips. And we see so many opportunities brought to these young players. And it's very difficult for them too, because some of them were on a roll before all of this happens. And it's just so hard. You don't have tournaments anymore. All of a sudden, everybody's dry. So this is great to see that they finally have a chance to keep their form going and to keep playing high stakes tournaments. As the developers continue to work on fixing this problem, as soon as we can, we will go on another short break, and hopefully when we return, we'll be close to resolving the issues and resuming the games. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to chess.com's coverage of the Barber and Rockefeller. Well, there are good news and regrettably there are bad news. Chess.com server is experiencing some challenging technical issues. Now, the game board positions have all been saved, as are the timestamps. So everyone on chess.com's team is working as diligently as possible to restore the server and to restore the position. And the positions and games will be resumed once the server restarts, but we are not exactly sure when that is. So the schedule will be as follows. At noon Pacific, that is 3 p.m. Eastern, the stream will go back online, and the hosts, and they will be different. I'll be rejoining, I think, at 4 Eastern, but the hosts will go over the results of the games. Of course, we know that most games were over. There were a couple of top games that are still ongoing. So once the server is back, you're welcome to follow that. But we will be signing off while these technical issues are getting resolved. And the broadcast will resume. That's the good news, at noon Pacific, with a recap of the results and, of course, the start of round 6. So, William, any thoughts on what we saw early in the early going? What is your hot take?
Well, I mean, it's still hard to say because some of the critical games are going on, especially the one with Christopher Yu. I really wanted to see if my prediction of a draw would come to fruition in that game. But I still think that the tournament is in the balance, and I'll really have to see the updated scores at the end of this round to get a better feel for all the players and kind of what can come about. But I will tell you this: it's very obvious that the players came to play, and so many are looking to take home that national championship and represent their state very well. So lots of talented players, fun games to watch, and most of all, it was a pleasure to work alongside with the legend Danya, or what I like to call him now, Nia. So hopefully that sticks.
I appreciate that, William, and likewise, it's been a pleasure doing commentary with you. So I personally will be breaking to teach some classes and then rejoining at around 4 Eastern. But this has been awesome, William. I really enjoyed commentating with you. And so we will be signing off now. Once again, the broadcast will resume at 12 Pacific, and the servers will be restored then. And the host will conduct a recap of the results and jump right into the next round. So on behalf of chess.com, this is GM Daniel Naroditsky commentating with National Master William Aramil. It's been a pleasure. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but keep your seatbelts fastened and stay tuned for the resumption of the broadcast at noon Pacific. Thank you.
Thanks.